Hi everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to go through some different reading strategies. Modelled reading, reading aloud, shared reading, guided reading, independent reading, buddy reading and reciprocal teaching. As with the writing strategies that we've been talking about, each of these reading strategies has a role to play in developing reading, and all levels of development can benefit from all strategies if the skill development is aimed at the right level. The good news is that as we move through this tutorial, you should be able to draw some parallels between these reading strategies and the writing strategies that you've already learnt. This is because many of these strategies sit within the gradual release of responsibility model, where the process starts off with high levels of teacher support and low levels of student responsibility, and move gradually towards releasing that responsibility for the reading to the student. Hence the words modelled, shared, guided and independent appear, and many of the basic characteristics of how these strategies work will sound familiar. Modelled reading is an explicit demonstration of reading. The teacher uses a thinking aloud method to show the students how a proficient reader thinks and gains meaning from text. Teaching is intentional and pre-planned. That is, the teacher chooses a specific focus to model during the session. It might be showing the students how to decode words, or how to locate the information that they need to answer certain types of comprehension questions. It might be a demonstration of how fluent reading sounds, or what expression sounds like. The student's role in this strategy is to listen. They don't participate in the actual reading. This is more than just reading aloud to students. The teacher is demonstrating and explaining what they're doing to make the skills and strategies explicit for the children. Reading aloud to children is a type of modelled writing in that the teacher, in that the teacher is the one doing the reading, but it's slightly different from what we talked about on the previous slide. Unlike modelled reading, where there's a planned focus for the lesson, when reading aloud, the purpose is purely for the children to hear what reading should sound like. Texts are usually at a level that would be too difficult for the students to read alone, but at a level where they have good listening comprehension. Students are exposed to new vocabulary and concepts, different story structures, fluency and expression. You can find more information on reading aloud to children of all ages in the e-text on pages 273 and 274. Shared reading is a teaching strategy that involves the educator reading aloud and pointing out features of the text while they're doing that. The students join in and share the reading of the book or text while being guided and supported by the students. Shared reading sessions often involve the use of a big book with enlarged text and illustrations so that all of the children can see. Sessions can be done with a small group or with the whole class. You might use a small group if you have a group of children that all need to focus on a particular skill, or the whole class if you're introducing a new concept. Activities relevant to the focus of the lesson usually follow a shared reading session to reinforce the learning. Guided reading is the next stage in the gradual release of responsibility model, where the reading is done by both the teacher and the students. The teacher guides and coaches the students in the application of reading strategies and skills. The chosen text is at instructional level, not too hard and not too easy, within the zone of proximal development. That is, they can read most of the text, but not all of it without support. The students are practicing reading strategies that they already know, and the teacher might help them to apply this knowledge to new texts and may also teach some new strategies. Usually the children are all reading together as a group with the teacher, but towards the end of the session, the children may have the opportunity to reread the text independently while the teacher moves from child to child listening. There isn't enough time to listen to each child read the whole book, so this is just a chance for the teacher to listen to the student read part of that book. This is a small group strategy and groupings are flexible. Children may be grouped according to their reading level, but they may also be grouped according to the focus of the teaching or the skill that they need to learn or reinforce. Running records are conducted periodically to help the teachers determine the students' reading level and skill development for these groupings. As I mentioned above, there isn't enough time in a guided reading session to conduct running records, so this is another of the many things that teachers need to find time to do at another time. Page 284 of the eText has more information about guided reading. Another thing to think about with guided reading is that because the teacher's working with a small group of students, the rest of the class need to be able to work on something else independently. This takes some practice, but even foundation students are able to achieve this with the right training. Activities for the rest of the class need to be meaningful, relevant, and authentic, not time fillers. The tasks need to be ones where the students are consolidating or practicing known skills, as they need to be independent and be able to complete the task without you. Some examples of these independent tasks might be listening post activities, phonics games, word sorts, writing activities, sequencing tasks, cloze exercises, paired reading, or working on a relevant and appropriate app. Organisation is very important. It helps to have a task board to help the students to know what they need to do next. They need to know where to put their work when they've finished and where to find the next activity. You also need to set really clear guidelines so that the children know that while you're working with that group, that they're not allowed to interrupt. I like to explain this by saying I'm in my bubble while I'm working with that group, so they need to help each other. And at appropriate times, I then come out of my bubble to check for questions. You can find an example of a lesson plan for guided reading on pages 286 and 287 of the eText. When you look at this, make note of how detailed it is. Every step of the lesson is planned out for effective learning. Independent reading is an important step in the process of learning to read. Regardless of how quickly a child picks up the skills of reading, they only become proficient readers through many hours of practice. Children have greater control over choosing the text that they read with this strategy. Early on, silent independent reading may just look like looking at the pictures, but as reading skills develop, they start to recognise words and read a well-known book by heart. The eventual aim is for children to be reading books at an independent level, that is, the ability to read over 95% of the words unaided. Home reading is a form of independent reading, and the books that the children take home should be able to be read at 95% accuracy or more. As teachers, you'll encounter a lot of pressure from parents to move their children up a reading level or box, saying that the books are too easy. It's very important that you reinforce that the books are supposed to be easy, as the children are practicing and consolidating their reading skills, and we don't want to encourage struggling reading behaviour. Buddy reading is a strategy where two students are paired together to do reading. Usually one student is more knowledgeable about reading than the other in order to provide support and a model of reading. When using this strategy, the more knowledgeable student is able to model what reading fluently with expression sounds like, articulate reading strategies and responses to text, and ask questions. This is helpful to the less able student. It's helpful to the more able student also, because they need to focus on providing a good model and so practice reading fluently, and by articulating what they're doing, they're showing what they know about reading. Reciprocal teaching is a strategy where the students become the teacher or the person who's guiding the discussion in the small group reading situation. Initially, teachers model and then help the students to learn to guide the discussion using 4 comprehension strategies: summarising, question generating, clarifying, and predicting. This strategy is usually used with middle to upper primary students or more able readers in junior primary, so would not be an appropriate strategy to use with children who are still having to do a lot of decoding and using the pictures to help them make meaning from text. I hope that this tutorial's been useful, and let us know if you have any questions. Thanks everyone.